Good morning. I'm happy to be here to speak about some of our projects. I'm alone today. My partner is in bed, but she catched a bad cold. So I will try to talk the things she told about. We did these projects. We're working together since our time of study already 30 years. And it's a special exercise for me to talk about a very small building. That was the question, the dairy in Gaasbeek. Such a tiny building, and talking 50 minutes about only one room, it's a bit too much. So I extended this talk with another building, which is actually the parent of this building. This is the child of another building, which is in Bruges, the concert hall in Bruges. Both of them are buildings for music that makes them family, the one to each other, to the other one. But they have a very different function. This building in Gaasbeek, is just a building for a private family who is very interested in music actually, and we are interested as architects in what we call the architectural culture. That means how architecture can communicate with other media, especially with the arts. There's a kind of line in our work that we cooperated with artists, made buildings for art, mainly visual arts, but at a certain moment we got this opportunity to make something for an art that is so special, the music. It was a strange question that this client living nearby, who bought the dairy, he said, I bought this building and I don't know what to do with it. And I said, of course I know what you have to do with it. You have to build a little place for music because you love so much music. And indeed, because the man who owns this building is not a musician himself, but he always invites musicians to play in his house. So we suggested to make something very particular with that dairy, a special room where music could be played. It was also the possibility to do something else for him, because he does not only love music, and it's classical music, but he also likes books, old books, incunables, and so we thought we could bring the two together, a private library and a music room, a place for musicians. It's interesting that architecture can communicate with other media. In our work, it was during a long time we worked for contemporary art. Our friends are contemporary artists, and we could communicate a lot with them. I just want to mention that very special friends of us are Spanish artists, Juan Muñoz and Cristina Iglesias. And it's to them that I dedicate this lecture. We were happy to work with them in several projects. And the contrast with music is not only, it's only a superficial contrast. I think it's possible to have thoughts with this form of art which could relate quite directly and give inspiration to a building. The dairy is a particular small building with a pitched roof, and there was behind this small building there was a shed, a steel shed, which was completely rusted, impossible to use it anymore, but it gave us the opportunity and allowed us to build a volume behind that small building. And we wanted to make something like an organ, a kind of particular typology, which would refer to the great culture in general of the historical architecture. I try to explain later. You take it, and or you can sit there, and I sit because I cannot. It's just another one. It's just not working. Yeah. It's back. It's too sensitive. Not really working. Can I touch this one? I will do it. It's just on the button. Okay. You will do it? Okay. A dairy is a small agriculture organization where farmers bring their milk, and in which the milk is produced, is pasteurized, or they're making butter of it. It was empty, and the owner who bought the building is somebody who wants to reconstruct a landscape. The natural landscape of the Pajottenland, which is a landscape nearby Brussels. We are only at 8 kilometers from the market from Brussels. And this landscape is a landscape that we can find in the work of a fantastic artist who lived there in that area, which is this man, which is Bruegel the Elder. Bruegel, he's an enigmatic personality. Nobody knows from where he comes, where he was born, probably somewhere in Holland. But he lived and worked in Brussels, and his fantastic paintings show the landscape of that area, particularly that area where the dairy is. You can see him. This is a self-portrait he made. He was an enormously critical artist. It's for sure that he traveled to Italy, and he has seen the works of Renaissance artists. Although he had this fantastic own expression, he is very often called the painter of farmers' lives, but his vision is much wider than purely showing the life of farmers in the 16th century. His pictures overlook the world. They show white images. It's like he's flying over a landscape. He's flying, and you see the end of the world. In one painting, he is creating a universe which is incredible. This is one example of his work. And It calls the harvest. It's the summer painting. He did the whole cyclus of winter, summer, autumn, and spring. All these paintings are in one room now in Munich, the fantastic Bruegel at the Kunsthaus in Munich. All these paintings are together there. But this painting shows a church in between the green and between the bush over there. This church is very nearby the place where the dairy is still existing, the small church. It's about 2 kilometers from where the dairy is. While the question of our client was very open, do something with this place, we thought about this ability of Bruegel to overlook the world. And one of the thoughts we had, maybe we make a building that is for you and your love for music, maybe also a building that can, in a way, overlook the world. And that was one of the leading ideas for this building, which is actually a building where you can go in, but also a building where you can walk up. I will show it later. Okay, the next one. It's a very small project. It has only a footprint of about 25 meters on 25. It's nearly square, more or less square, and as you can see, it's embedded in a slope, a small hilly landscape, and it's really embedded in that slope. It's so exceptional in our country that you have a hilly landscape. Flanders in Holland, they are called the low countries by the sea. They are extremely fat, and if there's some highness of a few meters, we already are talking about hills and mountains. It's very specific, and especially in that beautiful small village of Gaasbeek, which has this Bruegelian landscape. We try to organize our building with a feeling of, well, you're coming from down and walk up to the building. Actually, the building is built behind the original structure where the steel hall was. The original house we reorganized as a kind of place where musicians could stay. They have rooms there where they can stay for some period when they are where they do their rehearsals. They have rooms, they have a kitchen, they have all what they need for staying there and concentrate. And they have the hall, the small hall behind, to practice music. Time to time, there are small concerts in this building for about 100 people who can come there and listen finally when musicians have studied. They do a small performance. But they can also, while the piece of land is so small, because on both sides next to that piece of land, there's already another house. It's really typical of Flemish situation. Many houses along the roads everywhere. We thought maybe we should find also a way that these people can walk outside. Why not walking on the building? Why not have a small promenade on top of the building? And that generated the plan of the building, which is actually a spiral leading up to a terrace for some height where you can overlook the landscape. There's a castle nearby, but you can see in wintertime. In summertime, it's just behind the trees, but in wintertime, you can see the castle of Egmond. and also the house of the owner can be seen from the top of that building, which is belonging to which is dependent to the castle. We wanted to use a quite old technique, and we used a material that is so common in our country, which is brick, bacon, earth, and we were wondering if we could overspan a place with brick. It's not only with brick, it's also concrete, but no steel, stony materials. That was that was the goal we had. We would like to experiment how we could make our own vault, a kind of vault that would overspan the place. We'll see it later. So the inside of the building is the negative of the outside of this spiral walkway on top of the building. So then we had the idea that the building would have low air, the inside space would have low areas that climb up to a higher center. And we might experiment if that would be an interesting volume, an interesting interior space, and an interesting geometry for music. So we talked about it with acoustical engineer. We did tests, the small tests on models. What would that be? Highing up the volume, because at the real center of the building, the volume is about 9 meters high for a room, for a quite small room. That's high, and it might produce some kind of interesting acoustics. That was what we thought, and what we tried to realize. Next one. So there's a quite long walkway. You turn like three times around the center, and you walk up, and then all of a sudden you're above. You just can look above the pitch of the small building in front of that. There in those trees at that end, there's the castle. You can only see it in wintertime when the leaves are falling down. People walk on the building just when they don't rehearse. So the musicians can sit outside there, or they can have a conversation outside, or have a smoke outside. But the whole building is really constructed from the outside skin as well as the inner skin is a brick layer which is covering a concrete structure. Next one. So a few windows allow light, or introduce light in the central space below it, and it's very specific when you walk by. When you walk over this path leading to the top of the building, that you can gradually see lower and lower into that building. It's introducing morning, midday, and evening light on particular moments. Yeah. Next one. Okay. Next one. This is the simple plan of the building. You walk from the front into that building, which is the old gate where chariots could go in. Most of the time they stayed here, and they put on their milk cans here on a kind of terrace, small terrace. We kept the terrace because the street is quite nice and is overlooking prairies where horses are running at the other side of the street. This is the whole old house. This is a connecting area between the complete new building, which is this one. There's a little courtyard related to the space. When people or in the building, they have two possibilities to go out here and walk on the building, but they can also use the little courtyard here, which is introducing light again. This part of the building is completely organized as a house with a living room, with a kitchen, and with bedrooms under the roof on top of it. And that's the hall where the music is there. The complete space is surrounded by shelves for books, which is interesting for the acoustics also. You need always this balance between reflecting walls and absorbing walls. Books are very good for absorbing sound. Next. As you can see, the space becomes more and more narrow to the top, ending up this platform. Sometimes the musicians are eating outside, bring up the food on top of it, or have a drink or have a conversation on the outside. Okay. Yeah, okay. This is a section of the building. It was just calculating when you're on top of the building, you could overlook the landscape. You're higher than the top of this roof. And why building such a building? Why making this thing? As architects, we try to find a connection with, without pretension, having the pretension, but we try to find a connection with a great historical aim to overspan places with stone structure. I think about the great architects in the past, like, of course, Brunelleschi, the famous story of the cupola of the Dome of Florence, but also an incredible architect like Mimar Sinan, who did his lifelong work overspanning places, but with stone cupolas. It was in the a bit in the spirit of this this wish to overcome height and length that this small building is created. Another, and also it could realize an interesting height for music. It's just so simple. You need height to produce or to be able to give it energy to sound. This is how the building looks from the inside. It was a specific way to construct it. It was like we made a wooden cover table that we could extend always to a certain height, and we could lay. We meticulously designed the pattern of the bricks and the ceiling where they had to be put exactly, and slowly we could, and we put them in this pattern. We put little beams of steam. First we threw sand in the joints of this bricks, so that the concrete that we would pour later on this brick would not fall through the bricks, that it would be that the ceiling would not be damaged by the concrete. The joints of this bricks, we never fill them up. It's also for an acoustical reason to have for having a lot of relief in this roof, which is helpful, which is producing when sounds are touching the ceiling. There's a little local randomness, and it gives a much warmer acoustic back into the space. the interesting thing is that in such a small space, which is nearly comparable, like the one we're into, that there are very different heights in the space, which is giving specific areas to that one room where people can sit around. The best place for the piano, because it's, of course, mostly chamber music that is performed and rehearsals for chamber music. So there's very often a piano there, and there's, we can store the piano back here. That's the first fly behind this wall. It's the only fly you cannot see inside the building. Then it goes further on to the top. But the piano is very often there. The best position of the piano is exactly under the highest area of the space. We had to design also a chandelier because the owners not only like to listen to music, they also like to look at movies, and the projector is hidden in the chandelier, and it can be projected on the highest wall here in the back. But you can see also there's one height of bookshelves and for places for CDs and records in the wall. It's a whole collection of this thing which is surrounding the space. Yeah. Okay. That's why how you come in, how the ceiling, the walls are also used to take away air. Air is blown in from the floor. The floor is very important because one of the questions also was, and the wishes also was, that these people like to dance and have dance parties, and so it's a dancing floor as well. Yeah. This is the window that leads to the small courtyard, outside courtyard, yard, and you can see how the space evaluates to the top of the building. Okay. Connection between the hall and the house. That's the living space of the house. So there's a real fast connection. And this okay, the next one. And the ceiling, which I already told, has these open joints. We didn't fill them up. Sometimes, although we did take care a lot, sometimes the concrete poured through the joints on a few places. But that's how it was just, you know, also a kind of experience to the building, making a building and this ceiling, to have a relation with very old building types, which are fascinating. I think probably also here in the south of Spain and in some bodegas you would find such kind of structures which are fascinating, but which belong, I think, to the world architecture. I'm thinking about, for instance, Seljuk architecture, but also to early medieval vaults. It's just this spirit and thought that that the space is constructed. Okay. So that's where the castle is. The owner of the castle, the historical owner of the castle, is Egmont. He was beheaded by Alva on the market of Brussels, the Duke of Alva on the market of Brussels. So this building was, I think each architect has this in his career, that buildings are related to other buildings. And the small concert hall here in Gaasbeek, we constructed during a very important operation of our office. It was the construction of a huge concert hall in Bruges, Bruges in Belgium. And Bruges is the holy city of Belgium. It's the complete city of Bruges. The next building. The complete city of Bruges is preserved. Everything is listed. Everything is protected. The whole center of Bruges is completely UNESCO protected also. So it was a huge responsibility to add a new building to that to the city. The next is this thing we built it there, but you can see the medieval structures of Bruges is completely preserved. Although Bruges is a kind of very special place because it was already on the list of English tourism in the 19th century, and a lot of the city of Bruges is actually rebuilt. It's 19th century reconstruction of the medieval town of Bruges. Catholic English people sent their children to Bruges to go to the school because it was the emblem of Catholicism and the ideal of the medieval city with a direct relation to God and earth, and which is expressed in the spires of the towers and the many churches in the city. It's for British tourism, and in the 19th century it was like the Jerusalem of the north. But Bruges, of course, is such a great historical place, and again it's dominated by one person, I think. Well, it's the concert hall, and it's a building with a volume and a magnitude, and it's related to the larger buildings of the city. The city hall, if you look very clearly to that hall, it's remembering the Palazzo Pubblico of the Tuscany cities, and there was so much relation between Bruges and Tuscany. The Medici had their branch of their bank in Bruges in the late 15th century. There's this St. Salvator's Church, and it's the Onze Lieve Vrouwkerk, the Church of Maria, the big cathedral of the city, completely built. It's a 13th century tower, completely built in bricks. Confronted with this thing is the concert hall. Can you do one back again? One back. Yeah. The concert hall is built near a marketplace, which is there, which is the cattle market of Bruges, and it has which is called the Zandis place, and it has been always the place where the transition between the countryside and where you could feel the transition between countryside and the city. In the late 19th century, the railway station was built in the middle of the square. So there's a tract of land, the tracks were here, constructed through the old urban fabric, because this was, both sides was still the city, but the tracks went through up till there where a railway station was built. In the 30s, the railway station was thrown down, and the railway was built. The railway station was built about 600 meters back over there. So there was this gap in the urban tissue, the urban fabric, and there was since long a wish to close the square again with a building. In 2002, Bruges was the European capital of culture, and that gave the opportunity for the city to construct a wish, an old wish, to construct a concert hall, because Bruges has this festival of old music each year, and they wanted a building for music, and there was the international competition. We had to build this building extremely fast because and the competition was in 1999, and in 2002 was the opening of the building. We wanted, in the appearance of the building, some references between the city, full of roofs, which are all in terracotta. They are all reddish terracotta. Actually, the earth from nearby of Bruges it's the clay of the area, and one of the very simple ideas is that we would like to make a building completely covered with ceramics. Another thing is that we were looking at, we were listening to the Pastoral Symphony of Beethoven while we were designing the building, but we also wanted that the building would have an appearance that is in between something that belongs to the city, but also in his form could have a relation with buildings on the countryside, with huge sheds, maybe halls for grain and things. In the outskirts of Bruges, there's some of these buildings, even Gothic buildings, which are agricultural buildings. It's not a direct reference, but something in the back of our minds had a relation to this. Next one. Yes, this man, very often when I am showing the building to people from outside Belgium, I'm talking about Jan van Eyck, the great painter, this enigmatic self-portrait of Jan van Eyck, presumed self-portrait of Jan van Eyck, because it's not sure, but who else could it be? Because there's an exact other painting, the exact dimension of this painting and that's for sure of his wife. So that must be the self-portrait of him. It's hanging in the National Gallery in London. It's one of the most stunning portraits I know, at least. This sharp regard, the way he looks to you, and this special ribbon and head he has, this reddish form on his head, and this nearly sculptural expression of it is something whenever you saw it, you never forget it. He was carrying the culture of his time. He's complete contemporary of, for instance, Piero la Francesca. He was one of these Flemish painters who were the inventors of oil painting, which later on was used in Italy, and the sharpness of his eye is also shown in all of his work. The intimacy also of his paintings. For instance, his famous painting that's hanging in the Museum of Bruges, the Adoration of Maria by the Canonic van der Palen. We were wondering if something of this intimacy and sharpness could be inspiring for our building. And what we absolutely want to do was to create a concert hall in which this direct relation between musicians and the audience would be a very intimate one. So this concert hall and the interior of the concert hall has a very intimate proportion. The people are sitting nearby the performers, and there's this eye-to-eye contact, which is also in the portrait of Van Eyck himself, but also the intimacy of what is happening in this painting. Something of this, dialogue should be there in the concert hall. That was the aim we had in our project. It was just in the back of our minds, and time to time we were looking at it. Next one. But there's also an incredible other thing nearby the concert hall. In the huge church, there's this sculpture of Michelangelo. In Bruges, there's a Michelangelo sculpture, and it was bought by an Italian family living at the end of the 15th century, and they bought it from it's one of the youth sculptures of Michelangelo, and it tells you that that incredible thing that in that time there was so much communication in Europe. It's okay. There was so much communication between those cities of Italy and the north, a communication that probably doesn't exist anymore, that some people in Bruges knew already the enormous talent of a young artist like Michelangelo, and they bought this sculpture for the church where it still now is, and in exchange they sent a painting not of Jan van Eyck, but of a contemporary of Jan van Eyck, Hugo van der Goes, and the painting is still in the Uffizi in Florence. It's the Adoration of the Magi from Hugo van der Goes, and Adoration of the Shepherds, by Hugo van der Goes. And I'm always so astonished by that at that time Bruges was really an intercultural city, and it's in this spirit that the concert halls should also function as a kind of building and exchanging things, and it's also now the place where many artists from all over the world come and play their music. Next one. That's the square, the design of the square. It's not ours. It's something from the 70s. Hopefully, it will be changed soon. Now we have the question of changing this building because there's a parking under the square, and that's the architecture of that period. And we can do a new building here. But one of the ideas we had in the competition, that we made a small tower, we call it the Lantern Tower, in front of the building. And there's the direct relation with small concert hall of Bruges. This is the tower that contains, that in this tower, there's the chamber music hall of the concert hall. Next one. Yep. Entrance area of the building, a huge window, which is like the rosace of a church, which is also a projector screen, and yeah, the filigrane facade in terracotta, which was a bit inspired by some of the late Gothic fenestration in some of the buildings in Bruges. Yep. Next one. Building is completely concrete. Next one. The interiors are completely in concrete, and there's a long ongoing plan that artists will be invited. Unfortunately, it started already. Will be invited to make art pieces on the concrete wall on specific places. For instance, here there's already a photo piece of some of artists. The other artists will do things directly on the concrete walls, like in maybe a Byzantine church, when that during a long period artists can make works. We are not very quick at the moment. We introduced on several places. We had to work with very poor materials because of the budget. It's the cheapest building you can imagine, but so it's the balustrades are made in plywood, but we made color schemes on that plywood, and that's and again a kind of relation with painting. We calculated the terracotta color, excuse me, the terracotta color by a spectral analysis, and so we had the precise number of that color, and we divided that color in 7 other colors, and that's the color rows we used in the balustrades, which are going all over the building. We were just simply inspired by the word color piano, which is an English word of row of colors, and it was like the direct relation with music. In German is that word Farbenklavier, and we just used simply this this idea for some decoration of the building. Okay, we go through it. So also in the color is in the windows, and it at a late moment when the sun is in the west, the color is all in the space, and the gray walls of the concrete all of a sudden become very colorful. We just go through it. That's the chamber, just one second. That's the chamber music room in which we also use the idea of the spiral. People are sitting around the performers. It's a very small chamber music hall where string quartet or piano or a small concert can be given. But people are like in an Elizabethan theater surrounding the musicians. I should go on. Yeah, I can go on. That's how the concert hall functions. Maybe we go on to the interior of the big hall. It's building on existing parking, partly. We had to prick through and make foundations by pricking through steel columns through an existing parking, which was technically very difficult, and the whole building bears on springs, so that there's no noise and vibrations coming from the parking into the building. Next to it. This is the chamber. This is the concert hall. It's as well a concert hall as a music theater. Again, color is introduced in the hall. It's a very small, intimate hall for 1,200 persons, I think. It looks like that. This is the end of it. Thank you.